led the people of Israel from Egypt to the promised land, and then in 40 years of wandering in the wilderness. The book of Deuteronomy has Moses and a new generation of Jews right outside the promised land once again. There, Moses makes an impassioned plea for this new generation to follow the good and powerful God who has brought them to this place. He then highlights certain laws they are to have in place when they settle in the promised land. As we worked our way through chapters 21 through 25, we've seen Moses jump around a little bit, much like we might as we're giving some final instructions that something comes to our mind, oh yeah, and don't forget to do this, and trying to fit all those things in and fit them all together. For that reason, I see three major headings that help us understand these chapters in terms of just all the things that Moses covers. And those headings are purity, provision for women, and rules for interaction in society. Now, we worked through many of the principles related to purity, but have one more slide left. Now, as you turn to that portion of Deuteronomy 21 through 25, remember, these verses on purity always have a qualifier to do this or that so the land is not defiled, or because God detests this or that. That's what caused me to put that in that category. And if these laws that are given appear odd or weighty, we can be glad that we live on this side of the cross. That's always a thing to remember when you're in the book of Deuteronomy or Numbers or Exodus or Leviticus, that ultimately we recognize that Jesus has established something through his sacrifice and through the cross that gives us a different relationship with God. We are freed from the law. Not that it's not a process of sanctification or we don't obey it. It just is not the principle that connects us with God, that establishes that relationship with God. But now God, through his Son, forgives us of our sin, forgives us of all the things that we've done breaking the law, and then provides his Holy Spirit to help us live in the law. And not so much necessarily the requirements and regulations that we find in the Old Testament, but the things that we find in the New Testament. But what I would remind you of, though, is as we engage with the God of Christ, the God of our lives, we have to remember he is the same God that declared these laws. I think these laws do say something about his character. I think these laws do say something about what he cares about, and I think that's more what we take away. What is it showing us about God? What is it showing about ourselves? Or what is it showing about what God cares about? I would particularly say, too, in terms of some of the things we're looking at, is that these laws were spoken in a time that we are completely distant from. In terms of different things that we might understand now, or the things that we've come to as a society, and recognize that the world that these laws were spoken in was completely different. And so we might see things maybe as being unjust, when ultimately it's the ultimate of justice in that context. It's the ultimate of care and provision. So, one last slide for purity. Some of these odd things that are spoken here in terms of what it has. Oh, those are even too small for me. So basically, maybe it's clearer over here, so I'll read from here. Yes, kidnapping a fellow believer. Again, all these laws on purity, chapter 24, 7 through 9 of the verses. Kidnapping a fellow Israelite and leprous diseases are covered. Basically, kidnapping is bad. Kidnapping is something that brings strict penalty. I think it is a capital offense in terms of kidnapping an Israelite. And then leprous diseases. God really cared about skin diseases, and we see now how important those were. Basically, what they're instructed to do is do what the Levites say. If you go into the book of Leviticus, you see that the process of dealing with skin diseases is covered there, and basically that process was, if you find yourself with a skin disease, go to the Levites. The Levites will give you instruction. Is it this kind of sore? Is it that kind of sore? Do you treat it in your home? Are you removed from the community and you go outside the camp, and then you come back and you're assessed by the Levites again? So basically, Moses summarizes all this in Deuteronomy by just saying, hey, if you have a leprous disease, just make sure you follow what the Levites tell you. He also reminds them that God gave Miriam leprosy because of her disobedience, according to her brother Moses, as they were traveling through the desert. So, again, that is what, again, the issue of purity that is addressed there. An odd thing that is mentioned in chapter 25 through 11 through 16 is if two men are fighting and a woman wants to help out her man and she grabs his private parts, it actually says it there. Again, you know, another thing this is like, I forgot mentioning, this is kind of like taking your vitamins. You know, it's eating spinach, you know, you don't like to eat it, but it's good for you. You know, this just shows a dedication to the Word. I'm not going to take a lot of time with these things, but you just have to recognize this is in the Word of God. But I think what it does is it prioritizes what that speaks to. You know, what is genitalia? What is it that is valuable in there in terms of source of life? And again, when you're compromising that, when you're doing something because of protecting your husband to affect someone else's life and their ability to procreate life, well, that's a bad thing. And that's what it's saying. Just don't, you grab his foot, grab his hand, do whatever, just don't grab there. And that's, again, that's in the Bible. And it's just 25, 7 through 19, remember evil of the Amalekites and blot out their memory. Basically, the Amalekites were a group of people, as the Israelites were going through the wilderness, they attacked the Israelites, and particularly attacked them and attacked the vulnerable, those who were weak, those who were at the end of the column because of them not being able to move as fast as the others. So God says in that passage, 25, 7 through 19, blot their memory out of the land. And that is what is said there. Now, the next section that we're going to go to, again, that's the last slide on purity. All those verses that speak of, again, that God detests these things, or the land's going to be affected as if you don't do these things. Where we move on to is this provision for women. Now, as we transition to that, we might find that even in our modern senses that these mean something different to us, or they hit us in an uncomfortable way. So we have to understand that compared to other societies in that day, they showed regard and protection that was oftentimes absent. You know, it is unfortunate how mankind, male people, have taken advantage of their role in society. Basically, if you imagine in the beginnings of a society of people being built up because of the fact that women generally were weaker than men, because of the fact that they were given the means to carry children and birth them, they were oftentimes associated with the home and taking care of the children, and they didn't have opportunities to do much else beyond that. And so therefore, many societies just saw them basically as property, that they elevated the man to a place where he could just do anything he wanted to a woman and to his wife without any implication or consequence from the law. And so when we see here the Word of God and the provision of the law, God's saying, no, there has to be provision. There has to be protection for women because they are one of the vulnerable people in society. So we have to understand in that society is that a woman outside of a relationship with a man was a vulnerable person. You know, naturally for a daughter to wake up in a home, to be raised up in a home, basically that was her protection, that was her provision. But then she would go from her home to a husband, and then he would be her provision. But for a woman that didn't have that, or a woman where that was dissolved or affected, that put her in a very vulnerable space. And in many ways, that's what the law here is protecting and providing for. And so, let's turn to 21, 10 through 14, and we will read all of these in terms of what God communicates about, and effectively, like I said, valuing women in a greater way than any other society would at this time. And so it says, when you go to war against your enemies, and the Lord your God delivers them into your hands, and you take captives, if you notice among the captives a beautiful woman, and are attracted to her, you may take her as your wife. Bring her into your home, and have her shave her head, trim her nails, and put aside the clothes she was wearing when captured. After she has lived in your house, and mourned her father and mother for a full month, then you may go to her and be her husband, and she shall be your wife. If you are not pleased with her, let her go wherever she wishes. You must not sell her or treat her as a slave, since you have dishonored her. And so again, just recognize what is here. That I think in some ways, the idea of her shaving her head, the fact that she changes her clothes, is a break from her former life. Whatever worship of a foreign god was there, whatever memory of a former life was there, naturally, hopefully we understand that in that time frame, this would just be assumed. That we capture another people, I take women, I take advantage of them, I throw them to the side, and it's nothing. I mean, that was the pattern of how other empires, other nations worked in terms of vanquishing another country. And so basically for the Israelites, if they did it, there's regard for those women. There's a regard for the process they're going through in terms of changing and moving from their country and from their family to another place. I mean, there has to be a separation. God does want them to understand that now you're part of the people of Israel, that there's a God to worship, there's a God to regard in terms of the society, but we're still going to give you a month to mourn. Like, you have to understand, man, that the woman that you're choosing, if you choose to do this, again, this is not just carte blanche, take any woman you want, do to her whatever you want. No, there's rules and standards that are applied here that, again, is about the protection of women. And so basically, for her to do that, I think on some level, again, is giving her a process of, let me internalize the transition that I'm in. You know, to the extent that I think we have to be aware in our own lives what transitions we face and what does God will and purpose for those things in terms of what He's providing, what He's developing, what He's teaching us, and then where He's leading us in the context of that. But to have this point of reflection, to have this time to think about that, and think about how we're being affected by that is what God has recognized. I also wonder if there's a process here of the man distancing himself from whatever would make her beautiful. That it was kind of like, oh, look at her flowing hair, her beauty of her nails. Isn't she really well kept? Well, you know something? You're going to break her down to brass tacks. You're going to cut off her hair, trim her nails, and whatever was really attractive on people. So in other words, it's about her. It's not about her beauty. Think about, you're going to go a month with her bald, with a shaved head. How long is it going to take for that hair to grow back? And so I think it's just a process for an Israelite man to say that this is not property, this is not a possession, this is a person. And that's what he is regarded, that's what God is looking out for. And again, what would normally be in that society, or again, in that time frame in human history, there would be no regard like this in that. So again, promoting the value of women. 22:13 through 19. This is actually this passage. Well, I'll describe this rather than reading this because we actually went through this before. This is when a guy on his wedding night, if you will, finds something impure with the woman that he's married. And basically this is where the mother and the father take the sheet and go to the elders if the man has the problem or has an issue and show that look, our daughter was a virgin. And so basically letting the elders approve that. We actually talked about what happens if it was true under purity, if it is true that she was unfaithful, that she was not a virgin, then there's strong consequences for her. But just notice what happens in terms of what happens to him. So the girl's father, let's pick it up in 13. The girl's father will say to the elders, I gave my daughter in marriage to this man, but he dislikes her. Now he has slandered her and said, I did not find your daughter to be a virgin, but here is the proof of my daughter's virginity. Then her parents shall display the cloth before the elders of the town, and the elders shall take the man and punish him. They shall fine him 100 shekels of silver, and give them to the girl's father, because this man has given an Israelite virgin a bad name. She shall continue to be his wife, and he must not divorce her as long as he lives. So again, if it turns out that whatever charge he brings against her is not true, there's protection for her. Again, this isn't a process of just throwing women away and just leaving them to their own devices. That if you bring something up in terms of a charge, you have to understand what that says to a society. What mark is on that woman's head because of the fact that you've shamed her. So again, once you've done that, once you've brought it before a public setting, that you have to own that for the sake of the protection of that woman. So all these things falling into that category of really regard and protection of women. 25 through 39 says that, but if you are out in the country, a man happens to meet a girl, pledged to be married, and rapes her, only the man who has done this shall die. We covered that before. Do nothing to the girl. She has committed no sin deserving death. The case is like someone. Yeah, okay, so the girl pledged to be married and rapes her. Do nothing to the girl, she has committed no sin deserving death. The case is like that of someone who attacks and murders his neighbor, for the man found the girl out in the country, and though the betrothed girl screamed, there was no one to rescue her. Actually, it's 28 through 30 that I'm looking at here. And so, 29 rather. So, therefore, if a man happens to meet a virgin who is not pledged to be married and rapes her and they are discovered, he shall pay the girl's father 50 shekels of silver. He must marry the girl, for he has violated her. He can never divorce her as long as he lives. Again, so when we think about what this is describing, it's reprehensible. It's not something that we operate under, but to recognize that that is something that could happen in the context of that society. I mean, even to remember that God made certain laws because of the hardness of people's hearts. I think there's some aspect of this law accommodating people for the environment that they're in, but to recognize if you do that, and you work through if you commit that action, you're committed to that girl. Again, this isn't a process of what other countries would do, what you'd find in other societies where, again, women are just throwaways, they're just possessions, that they don't matter. God is raising the value of women up, ultimately showing that they too share in the image of God and should not be disregarded by men as property. And so that is really what is being reinforced in these passages. 24:5. If a man has recently married, he must not be sent to war or have any other duty laid on him. For 1 year, he is to be free to stay at home and bring happiness to the wife he has married. So again, another valuing of women. Like why does the man stay away from war? Because there's someone that can meet his obligations on the battlefield, but no one else can meet his obligations at home. But it's interesting to me that he doesn't say, man, you don't go to war, you stay home so you'll be happy. It says you stay home so you can make your wife happy. So she can experience the protection and provision that the presence of a man in her life would mean. See, again, in that society, a woman outside of her father's care would be vulnerable. She has to learn, what does it mean for me? Who am I outside of the person I've known all my life? And now all of a sudden, I'm with this other man. God says, don't go away for a year. Be home and develop that relationship. Develop just the answer to whatever fear or insecurity she would have because of who she is, and satisfy that and take care of her and let her know that, again, you're going to be the one that's taking over that father's responsibility and caring for her. So, again, another principle in the context of these things, that it's about the protection of women. It's about looking out for them to make sure that when they're not in their father's care, if another person either does something willingly or even violating her, that there has to be responsibility. There has accountability for the man in terms of him doing that. And then 25:5 through 10, I'll read this because this is just funny. If brothers are living together and one of them dies without a son, his widow must not marry outside the family. Her husband's brother shall take her and marry her and fulfill the duty of a brother-in-law to her. The first son she bears shall carry on the name of the dead brother, so that his name will not be blotted out from Israel. However, if a man does not want to marry his brother's wife, she shall go to the elders of the town gate and say, my husband's brother refuses to carry on his brother's name in Israel. He will not fulfill the duty of a brother-in-law to me. Then the elders of this town shall summon him and talk to him. If he persists in saying, I do not want to marry her, his brother's widow shall go up to him in the presence of the elders, take off one of his sandals, spit in his face, and say, this is what is done to the man who will not build up his brother's family line. That man's line shall be known in Israel as a family of unsandaled. Isn't that awesome? I spit on you and I tremble on your ashes. So again, what's behind it all? Again, this woman, like there's a family regard, there's a family associate, there's a family. See, not only are you responsible as a man, but all your brothers are responsible for this girl too. That they're supposed to take care of yours. So again, women not being women not being vulnerable in terms of their care and their protection, and that's just another aspect. Like, as you see these passages, hopefully you see what I'm saying, that, 21, 10 through 14, 22, 13, like they're kind of all over the place. But when I read them together, don't you see what's happening? You see all those verses on purity, where God is caring about something. It's God wants certain things done in a certain way, but Moses is bouncing back from a verse on purity, then a verse on women, then a verse on the regard for society. So we can move on from here, but again, that's the portion of that, God showing that He cares about women in a world that oftentimes didn't. And just so you know, Christianity, the things of God have always done that. The things of God has always elevated the value of women. And women can be grateful for what God has done to promote their value in a man's heart. Because outside of the influence of God, we might not have that in terms of how a man might normally operate. I would even say that much of the regard that we would have as men for women is something that's established in the Word. It's established in God that we would have that. Because what I oftentimes think about is outside of God saying something, outside of God declaring in His Word, giving us power to live in those things, what kind of people would we be? And when you see certain patterns in the rest of the world, and if we followed that pattern, like if the Assyrians won the day, and everyone became like the Assyrians, we would be violent and the world would be scary. If Hitler won the day, what would that mean in terms of the rest of the world? So thank God for godly influence and godly courage in terms of people, clinging to His Word and His standards to become the kind of people that God intended for us to be. And one of those things, as a man, is to regard a woman and value her in the way that God would have us do that. So now we move on to these verses that are about society. And I can tell you across the board, what it's about is that we are in this together. Certainly for the Israelite community, that basically in no way should you structure your life where things are about yourself and just what you need. And then that's what these verses say. Basically in 21:15 through 21, it talks about the rights of the firstborn son are still in place even if you have different feelings about their mothers. Again, read the passage. It basically says you have a child with this woman and you really don't like her, then you have a second child and you really like her, kind of a Rachel and Leah type dynamic. The right of the firstborn still happens independent of your feelings. Again, what is true is true, is what is right. The reference point is not what you think about it, what you feel about it, is what God thinks about it. Basically in 22:1 through 4, this is where the Israelite community and the standard of service, the standard of helping each other, again, in this together. Help your brother out if his livestock escapes or are injured, or if he loses something. Don't ignore him. It actually says that. Don't ignore your brother. Basically what it says, imagine an agricultural society, a cow, a goat, a sheep breaks out of the pen, and you find it in the yard. Again, it's not finders, keepers, losers, weepers. It's not, okay, boy, I'm glad he came into my property, now let me keep him. No, you give him back to him. In fact, it says that if it's not yours and this person lives far away, you keep it and take care of it until he comes back. So again, it's this thought of what am I doing for the sake of other people? That I'm not living my life unto myself, but I'm living my life in the context of community and caring for people. And again, this is something that God established. What are God's people going to be like? They're going to be a people that are pure, that regard a God that's holy. They're going to be a people that care about women and don't just see them as chattel, see them as possessions or property. What are we going to be? We're going to be a community that lives together for the sake of each other and taking care of each other, not ignoring other people's needs, but internalizing them as a responsibility for that. It is interesting that it goes beyond just livestock, that it loses anything. Like you borrow a tool, make sure you give it back. And you might need, you might need prompting from the person who you borrowed the tool from to remember you have it. But that's a nudge. But anyway, so take responsibility for your property, make it safe. Basically, what it says there is that if you have a house, you make sure you put a parapet around your roof so that someone walking on your roof doesn't fall off. So this is the insurance company verse. That basically, something, take care of your property, make sure there's nothing on it that's harm. But again, what does it cause us to think about? That I'm not having my house for what works for me. I'm thinking about other people. Oh, something, I don't want to create that situation that's unsafe for people. And that's what 22:8 says. The next slide. Again, all the functions of society, how they should operate. 23:15 through 16 says that if a slave takes refuge with you, don't hand him over to his master. Let him live wherever he wants and don't oppress him. I have that in parentheses foreign because that word is not in the Bible, but we would assume if it was a slave, it would have to be foreign because the Israelites were told to never enslave a fellow Israelite. But you realize how transformational and counterculture this is? That a slave comes into your town, comes into your area, comes under your possession, and don't take advantage of him? Don't send him back to his master? Don't send him back to the evil person of the foreign land? Again, that is radical in terms of what God is saying about himself and how his people would regard other people. Let him live wherever he wants. You want to live here, you want to live down the street, but take care of that foreign person and don't oppress him. 23:19 to 20, don't charge a fellow Israelite interest. Again, it's fine to do that with a foreigner, but don't do it with a brother. Once again, what does it reinforce? What does it tell us? That I'm not trying... See, I suppose we are probably getting into the verses that talk about taking care of the vulnerable. That's just another aspect of what God encourages in the context of Israelite society. That when you see someone that's weak, when you see someone that's vulnerable, that you don't take advantage of that. That you look for ways to help them in terms of your conduct. I was actually visiting Alex McLeod at his digs up in Pontiac this past week. Just kind of seeing what he does and so on and so forth. And I noticed in the school, there's this message of inclusion. Like, don't bully, include everyone. Reach out to the person that's hurting or vulnerable or alone or whatever. And, when I think about when we were growing up and someone has glasses in their 4 eyes, someone who's crippled, you make fun of them, right? I remember, what we used to say in the 70s is no one crueler than a kid in terms of how they treat other kids. And to recognize that there's a tendency in human nature to take advantage of the vulnerable, to actually reinforce our strength by putting people down. And how silly that is. How foreign that is to God and what he intends. Because the complete opposite is what is expressed in the law, in the principles that would guide Israel. And again, these principles are the same principles that now, as the Israelites establish and become that kind of people, they influence the world. That becomes a standard of the Jews. That becomes the message of Christ. And really, when Jesus says, love your neighbor as yourself, that's these principles. That's Jesus summarizing all the things that Deuteronomy and Leviticus says about take care of your neighbor, make sure you're giving him back his property, Make sure you don't ignore him. Make sure when you're building things on your property, you're thinking of other people, not yourself. Make sure you don't charge people interest. Don't take advantage of a brother. This is all. It's love your neighbor as you love yourself. Think about how would you. Don't think about how you want to treat people. Think about how you would want to be treated by people. And the same way that you want to be treated, you treat other people. That's a good reference point. And so that's 23, 19, and 20. 23 through 24 through 25. If you're in your neighbor's field, you can take what you can eat, but don't carry anything away or chop down grain stalks. Again, this is the whole idea of sharing. This is the whole idea of you have apple trees and someone comes along and they want an apple, they take an apple. And you take, but it actually says don't carry a basket. Don't start filling a basket with apples and carry it. Just take what you can handle and eat in that moment. You can take kernels of grain and put it in your hand and eat them, but don't cut down stalks of grain. Again, the whole idea of what are we garnering things for? What are we seeking to possess things for? For just ourselves or for the sake of other people? And God is establishing that principle amongst his people. The next slide. 24:6, don't take a millstone as a security for a debt. Basically what this says is, again, when you give someone, well, it's like us having a down payment. You know, you borrow money, okay, as a confidence that you're going to pay this back, give me a down payment to know you're going to pay the rest. Well, what they would have is they would have a security for a payment. So, okay, I've lent you this money, but give me something valuable that you have that will assure you'll pay me so I can give it back to you. It says don't take a millstone. That's the means that person would have for making food and grinding grain. You don't take away someone's capacity to make money, to get them to pay money. And then 25, 1 through 4. Actually, let's do 24, 10 through 22. Yeah, you know, this is, there's a lot of stuff here. You know something, what I'm going to say is this is all about not taking advantage of people that are weaker. But it's really impressive. I mean, can I just leave you with a homework assignment? Read 24, 10 through 22, and just see the number of times that when you're confronted with a person that is needy, when you're borrowing money, when you have, you're going to get a pledge from someone. Don't go in their house. Don't embarrass them. Don't go in their house to get the pledge. Let them come out to you to maintain their honor. And it's all about not taking advantage of the poor. The widows, orphans, and poor are mentioned a handful of times in that passage in terms of the most vulnerable of society. And again, what is Israelite society going to be about? It's about taking care of people. And that is something that any aspect of us in our culture, we have to give some credit to that. In terms of what is even established today, in terms of an idea we have. I think something that is incredible about our country, something our country does better than anyone else, is takes care of the vulnerable. People that are weak, people that are old, people that lose a job, whatever. Our social security system, our welfare system is all about that. Now, we know that it has also justified things that aren't good and aren't healthy, and maybe there's extremes in those things. But when you think about the baseline aspect of what this country is, taking care of those that are weak, that's Deuteronomy. That's what you find here in the scripture, and that's the kind of God God is. That's the kind of people that God wanted his people to be, and that's where I think, certainly for us, like there are certain aspects of the law when it comes to eating food. You know, I think the blanket and Peter and God giving the permission to eat. You know, we don't adhere to those things, but we have principles of relationship. We have principles of morality. We have principles in the Old Testament that are reinforced in the New Testament. We have to understand that that aspect of the law is as applicable for us today as it is to the Israelites back then. And I just assure you that when Jesus says, love your neighbor as your, how can the law be summarized? All those different things about here, make sure you don't pay interest, make sure you build a parapet, make sure, how do you love your neighbor as yourself? And that's what Jesus says. So let's bow and let's pray. Father, we're grateful for what you established here in the law that determined what kind of people your people would be. And so to recognize that we as believers are your people, and what you would desire for us is still clear today, but to know that through Christ we are forgiven, by Christ we are in relationship with you, by Christ, through Christ, we have power to become the people that you desire for us to be. Father, I do pray that if there's any disregard for either gender in anyone's hearts, that we would learn the inestimable value that men and women have in your economy and the regard that we should have for each other. Father, if there's anyone that, again, is struggling with the idea of serving or thinking of others rather than just themselves, I just pray that through your Spirit, through your word, there will just be conviction and power to be a different kind of people, not just thinking about us, but thinking about other people and having a love and the regard that you ultimately would call us to. It is in your Son, Jesus Christ's name, that we do pray.